A bustling medieval town, cobbled streets lined with timber-framed houses. The sun beats down on a warm summer day. The townspeople go about their daily business, merchants trading goods, children playing, women drawing water from a well. In the summer of 1589, the streets of Strasbourg were alive with activity. The town, nestled in the heart of the Holy Roman Empire, was typical of the era. Its people working hard to make a living, its marketplaces filled with the sounds of trade and chatter. But beneath the surface there was unease. The harvest had been poor, food was scarce, and the threat of disease loomed over the town. Yet no one could have predicted what was about to unfold. A woman, Frau Trophäa, in the midst of the street, she suddenly begins to dance. Her movements are strange, erratic. She spins, hops, and twirls, as if possessed by an unseen force. It all began with a single woman. Frau Trophäa, a resident of Strasbourg, stepped out of her home one day and began to dance. There was no music, no celebration, just an uncontrollable urge to move. At first, those who saw her were confused, even amused. But as the hours passed, concern grew. Frau Trophäa danced relentlessly, her face contorted in a mix of agony and ecstasy, unable to stop. Days pass, and more people join in the dancing. The streets are now filled with dancers, their movements frantic and uncontrolled. They dance day and night, some collapsing from exhaustion, others continuing despite injuries. By the end of the week, more than 30 people had joined her. Men, women, and even children found themselves compelled to dance, as if under a spell. The numbers swelled day by day, and soon the streets of Strasbourg were filled with the sight of hundreds of people, dancing without rest. The town was gripped by what would come to be known as the dancing plague of 1518. Next, the town officials and clergy discussing the crisis in a dimly lit chamber. They are visibly troubled, exchanging worried glances and hushed whispers. The town's leaders were baffled. Was this the work of the devil, a punishment from God, or simply mass hysteria? Theories abounded, but there were no answers. The dancers seemed to be in the grip of something far beyond their control. Attempts to reason with them, to restrain them, even to provide medical assistance, all failed. Next, religious processions through the streets, priests praying and sprinkling holy water on the dancers, to no avail. The dancers continue, seemingly impervious to any intervention. In desperation, the clergy organized religious processions, hoping to cleanse the town of this strange affliction. Priests prayed over the dancers, sprinkled holy water, and called upon divine intervention, but nothing worked. The dancing continued unabated. Some of the dancers even collapsed and died from exhaustion, their bodies pushed beyond their limits. Scenes of medieval medical practices, bloodletting, herbal remedies, and superstitious rituals being performed by healers and physicians. Medieval medicine was of little help. Physicians attempted to treat the dancers with the methods available to them: bloodletting, potions, and poultices. Some believed the dancers' blood had been overheated and sought to cool it through drastic measures. Others thought it was a form of hot blood caused by too much bile or an imbalance of humors. Yet despite these efforts, the strange epidemic persisted. Next, the dancers being herded into a large hall where musicians are brought in to play, hoping to dance out the affliction. The scene is chaotic and unsettling. In a final, desperate measure, the town's authorities resorted to an unconventional solution. They hired musicians and constructed a stage in the town square. The idea was to allow the dancers to dance out the affliction. Perhaps, they thought, if the dancers could exhaust themselves completely, the spell would break. But the plan only made things worse. The music seemed to drive the dancers to greater frenzy, their movements growing more frenzied and violent. The peak of the plague, with scenes of chaos, dancers collapsing, the town in disarray, and an overwhelming sense of despair. The dancing plague reached its peak in late July. By then, hundreds were affected, and the town was on the brink of collapse. The once lively streets were now scenes of chaos and despair. It seemed as if Strasbourg was cursed. A gradual fading of the dancing as the days pass. The streets begin to empty, and the town slowly returns to normal. The remaining dancers, exhausted and broken, finally collapse and cease dancing. But as suddenly as it had begun, the dancing plague started to fade. By early September, the dancers had collapsed from exhaustion or simply stopped moving. The streets of Strasbourg fell silent once more. The plague, it seemed, had run its course,